Are you sitting down right now? Because if you are, you might actually want to stand up. Just, ease out of the chair while we get started today.
Yeah, standing is probably a good idea based on what we're about to cover.
Seriously. Because today we are looking at a stack of medical research that, it fundamentally changes the math on what a normal day at the office actually does to the human body. We're pulling from this massive meta-analysis from The Lancet, data from Science Alert, and some really heavy findings from the Journal of the American College of Cardiology.
Right, and the sheer volume of data across all these sources is pretty staggering.
It is, and they all converge on this one incredibly sobering statistic, which is that sitting for more than 8 hours a day with little physical activity carries a mortality risk that's basically comparable to obesity and smoking.
Which is wild, right? Sitting in the exact same risk category as smoking, it really forces a systemic reevaluation of the modern workday.
Oh, absolutely.
We all universally recognize smoking as this severe hazard, yet we've built, our entire global economic infrastructure around an activity that the data suggests is equally compromising. Our workspaces are just fundamentally mismatched with our evolutionary biology.
Yeah, and so our mission for this deep dive is to figure out exactly why that mismatch occurs. We need to unpack why a daily gym habit doesn't just, automatically erase the damage of a desk job.
Right, the exercise illusion.
Exactly. We're going to examine the surprising and frankly kind of terrifying cellular biology of what researchers call stillness. And then, of course, we'll get into the science-backed micro-interventions that can actually protect your health without requiring you to abandon your 9-to-5 and, move off the grid.
Which is necessary, considering the structural reality of modern life. The vast majority of adults are currently spending up to 10 hours a day just sitting.
10 hours?
Yeah.
That's half our waking life.
Easily. You commute in a vehicle, you sit at a desk, you sit in endless conference rooms, you commute home, and then, you sit on a sofa to decompress. 10 hours is an enormous, unprecedented portion of the human waking cycle to remain just entirely motionless.
Okay, but I have to challenge that framing right out of the gate, because when I look at my own schedule, yes, I'm sitting at a desk for 8 hours plus the commute, but I also spend a solid hour doing heavy resistance training and cardio at 6 in the morning.
Sure, you're getting your workout in.
Right. I am sweating. My heart rate is way up. Are you really telling me that a 10-hour block of sitting at a desk just overrides that intense physical exertion?
Well, so it doesn't override it, but it also doesn't neutralize it. To understand the mechanics there, we really have to separate two concepts that public health has historically treated as interchangeable.
Which are?
Inactivity versus sedentary behavior. They are completely biologically distinct states.
They sound like synonyms to me. If I'm sedentary, I'm inactive, right?
In a casual colloquial sense, maybe. But in epidemiological terms, inactivity is defined merely by a deficit.
Okay.
It means you are failing to meet the standard public health threshold for exercise, which is usually, 150 minutes of moderate activity or 75 minutes of vigorous activity a week.
Got it. So if I hit the gym, I'm not inactive.
Exactly. If you run for 3 hours a week, you are highly active. You have completely cleared the inactivity hurdle. Sedentary behavior, however, is a specific physiological state.
It's an actual state of being.
Right. It refers to any waking behavior characterized by an energy expenditure of 1.5 metabolic equivalents or lower, basically while in a sitting, reclining, or lying posture.
Okay, so hitting the treadmill means I am not inactive, but the 8 hours at the desk means I am still highly sedentary.
Yes, and those two states have completely different biological pathways. The data reported by Science Alert really emphasizes that these are independent risk factors.
So the run is still doing something good, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. The morning run provides immense cardiovascular benefits. It strengthens the heart muscle, it improves your VO2 max, builds endurance. But, and this is the key, it does not undo the distinct, localized tissue damage and metabolic stalling that happens when your body remains in a fixed resting posture for 10 continuous hours.
Wait, okay. Is this sort of like thinking that because you've vigorously brushed your teeth in the morning, it's perfectly fine to swish sugary soda around in your mouth for the next 10 hours straight?
That is actually a great analogy.
Because, the brushing was a healthy action, but it doesn't create some magic force field that neutralizes the continuous exposure to an entirely different stressor.
Exactly. The morning run doesn't inoculate your cells against the effects of prolonged immobility. You are simultaneously accumulating the benefits of exercise and the distinct physiological damage of stillness.
Wow. Okay, so if the exercise isn't shielding us, we really need to look under the hood at what the stillness is actually doing. What is the physical mechanism here? Like, what happens on a cellular level when I sit in my office chair and don't move my legs for 4 hours straight?
So the cascade begins almost immediately, and it starts with skeletal muscle activity.
Okay.
Your muscles, particularly the large muscle groups in your legs and glutes, they are massive metabolic sinks. When you are moving, even just standing or shifting your weight, those muscles are constantly firing low-level electrical signals and contracting.
And I'm guessing that takes energy.
A lot of it. Those contractions require fuel, primarily in the form of circulating blood glucose.
So the muscles are constantly pulling glucose out of the bloodstream just to maintain basic upright posture.
Yes. The mechanical action of the muscle contracting literally signals transporter proteins, they're called GLUT4, to move to the surface of the muscle cells and actively pull glucose inside.
Okay, so what happens when I sit down?
When you sit down, the electrical activity in your leg muscles drops to near absolute zero. The contractions stop entirely.
Oh.
And because of that, the transporters retreat. The sink is suddenly plugged up.
And all that glucose just, backs up into the bloodstream?
It just remains in circulation, yeah. And to deal with all that excess glucose, your pancreas has to secrete higher and higher volumes of insulin to try and force the surrounding tissues to absorb it.
Which sounds like a recipe for insulin resistance.
It is the recipe.
Yeah.
Over time, as those tissues are bombarded with insulin, they downregulate their receptors. They become resistant. This continuous pooling of glucose and spiking of insulin is basically the primary mechanism driving type 2 diabetes.
Wait, so it's not simply an issue of, oh, I'm burning fewer calories because I'm not walking.
Yeah.
My body's fundamental metabolic engine actually senses the lack of movement and powers down into a sort of like a hibernation mode.
That is exactly what happens. And that hibernation mode extends way beyond just glucose. Fat metabolism suffers an almost identical fate.
Really? How so?
Well, there's this enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, or LPL. Its main job is to sit on the walls of your blood vessels and grab passing triglycerides, which are fats out of the blood so they can be used by the muscles.
Okay.
But research shows that prolonged sitting suppresses LPL activity by up to 90%.
Wait, 90% just from sitting in a chair?
Just from sitting, the enzyme effectively goes to sleep. Because the muscles aren't demanding fuel, the body just halts the extraction process.
So where does the fat go?
Those lipids continue circulating in your bloodstream, where they inevitably accumulate and contribute to arterial plaque.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and this is all compounded by a severe drop in vascular function.
Because the heart isn't pumping as aggressively, so the blood flow just slows down.
It slows down, but there's a very specific mechanical consequence to that. Blood vessels actually rely on the physical friction of blood rushing through them. It's a force called shear stress.
Shear stress.
Right, and that friction triggers the release of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is what keeps your blood vessels flexible and dilated.
Let me guess. Sitting ruins that too.
Completely. When you sit for hours, blood pools in your lower extremities. The shear stress plummets. Nitric oxide production drops off a cliff, so your blood vessels actually become stiffer, which directly drives up your blood pressure.
So, just to recap this horror show, within just a few hours of sitting, my glucose transporter shut down, my lipid-clearing enzymes drop by 90%, and my blood vessels literally stiffen up because the blood isn't moving fast enough to keep them flexible. I mean, it is a manufactured biological crisis.
It's a crisis caused entirely by evolutionary mismatch. The human baseline was forged over hundreds of thousands of years of constant low-level movement, foraging, walking, building.
Right, we were never just sitting still for 10 hours unless we were sleeping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our metabolic processes evolved to assume that movement would always be present. We simply didn't evolve an efficient secondary system to manage 10 hours of complete muscular silence.
Wow. Okay, so if the blood is slowly turning into this sluggish, lipid-heavy, glucose-rich swamp just from sitting, the organ force to pump that sludge is going to take a massive hit over time, which really brings us to the macro toll, specifically those findings from the Journal of the American College of Cardiology.
Right, the JAC study. It provides the big system-wide perspective on all those microscopic cellular changes we just discussed. They basically tracked a massive cohort to determine if there was a specific threshold where sedentary behavior began to severely damage the cardiovascular system.
And did they find one?
They did. They found an inflection point at about 10.5 hours of sedentary time per day.
And the risk profile beyond that 10.5-hour mark is jarring. Like, we are talking about heart failure and cardiovascular mortality increasing by 40 to 60%.
A near 60% spike in the risk of cardiovascular death. And crucially, this ties directly back to your earlier skepticism. These elevated risks persisted across the board.
Even for the gym goers.
Even in the individuals who are meeting or exceeding the public health guidelines for exercise?
Because an hour of elevated heart rate at the gym just cannot structurally reverse the vascular stiffening and the plaque accumulation caused by 10.5 hours of metabolic hibernation.
It's a structural limitation, yeah.
It feels like. Well, it's like leaving a car idling in the driveway every single day. You know, you look at the dashboard and the odometer isn't going up, so you think, hey, I aren't putting wear and tear on the vehicle.
Right.
But inside, the oil is getting sludgy, carbon is building up in the cylinders, the battery is just quietly draining.
That's spot on. The degradation comes from improper storage, not overuse. And the chassis of that car is warping too, which brings us to the musculoskeletal impact of sitting.
Oh, yes. The back pain.
Right. When we sit for prolonged periods, we aren't just altering our internal chemistry, we are subjecting our skeletal structure to immense, completely unnatural mechanical loads.
I feel that in my lower back almost every afternoon, honestly. But I always just assumed it was bad posture, like something I could fix by just sitting up straighter.
I mean, you can optimize your sitting posture, sure, but you can't eliminate the fundamental biomechanics of the chair itself.
What do you mean?
The human spine is designed to distribute weight dynamically through movement. When you sit down, you essentially lock the spine into a static C shape. This shifts the entire weight of your upper body off your core musculature and dumps it directly onto the passive structures, namely the intervertebral discs and ligaments of your lumbar spine.
Which just compresses the discs constantly, right? Without any relief.
Constant compression. And the problem is discs are avascular. They don't have their own blood supply.
Wait, really? How do they get nutrients then?
They rely entirely on the physical pumping action of movement, flexion, and extension. That's what draws in nutrients and expels waste. When you sit still, that pumping mechanism completely stops.
Do they just dry out?
They dehydrate and compress. Meanwhile, your hip flexors are held in a shortened, contracted position for hours on end, which eventually physically shortens the tissue. Then, when you finally stand up, those tight flexors pull your pelvis completely out of alignment,
Causing that anterior pelvic tilt that just pushes the lower back completely out of whack.
Exactly.
Man. So we have cardiovascular decline, metabolic dysfunction, and structural spinal degradation. And the sources point out that this actually extends to the brain as well, doesn't it?
It does. We see a direct link between extended sitting and cognitive decline, primarily through cerebral hemodynamics.
Cerebral hemodynamics, so blood flow to the brain.
Right. Brain fog isn't just you feeling tired. It's quite literally a symptom of reduced blood flow. When vascular function drops and cardiac output slows down due to extended sitting, oxygen and nutrient delivery to the brain is compromised.
So the brain is quite literally running on less fuel.
Exactly. Workers report feeling increasingly sluggish, alertness drops, and executive function slows down. Your cognitive hardware is essentially being starved of the resources it needs to operate efficiently.
When you compile all of this, the insulin resistance, the heart failure, the spinal compression, the cognitive starvation, it fully contextualizes that final, devastating statistic from the Lancet meta-analysis. Physical inactivity and sedentary behavior globally contribute to an estimated 4 to 5 million deaths every single year.
4 to 5 million. It is a quiet, slow-moving epidemic occurring in broad daylight, right inside our office buildings.
Okay, so we have thoroughly diagnosed the problem, but we really need a practical protocol here. The listeners tuning into this deep dive, they likely cannot just quit their desk jobs tomorrow.
No, of course not.
They have mortgages, careers, responsibilities that require a computer screen. So how do we reclaim our physiology without completely upending our professional lives?
The good news is that the most promising interventions focus on restructuring the day, rather than adding more grueling workouts to it. Researchers are shifting the paradigm away from telling people to increase their exercise and heavily towards strategies that simply reduce their sedentary time.
Which goes right back to the difference between inactivity and sedentary behavior. We don't need a second gym session. We just need to break up the 10-hour block of sitting.
Exactly. Look at the 2020 study published in Diabetologia. They demonstrated that replacing just 30 minutes of sitting with light physical activity throughout the day was associated with meaningful, measurable improvements in blood sugar control.
Light activity. Okay, so we aren't talking about doing a HIA workout in the break room. Just like walking down the hall.
Simply standing up, walking to a different floor to use the restroom, doing some light stretching. The mechanical threshold to re-engage those metabolic processes is remarkably low.
Oh, that's a relief.
Yeah. Remember the lipoprotein lipase enzyme and the GLUT4 transporters we talked about? They don't require heavy resistance training to activate. The mere act of standing up and walking engages the slow twitch muscle fibers in your legs just enough to turn those systems back on.
Because the workplace is where the bulk of this sitting happens, the sources mention some specific environmental and cultural interventions being tested in offices. Like, there was a UK-based study that successfully reduced daily sitting time by up to 90 minutes.
Yes, that was a fascinating study.
How do they actually achieve a 90-minute reduction without totally destroying office productivity?
They essentially engineered the movement back into the environment. It wasn't just giving people height-adjustable desks, though, that was part of it, allowing workers to alternate postures and change the mechanical load on their spine.
Right, standing desks are great, but they aren't enough on their own.
Exactly. So they altered the workflow itself. They instituted centralized trash cans and printers, forcing people to actually get up and walk across the office instead of rolling their chair over.
Right.
They integrated software that gently locked screens or prompted movement breaks every 45 minutes.
Oh, that's smart.
And they culturally normalized walking meetings for internal one-on-ones.
So they basically changed the architecture of the day to make movement the default, rather than this annoying interruption.
Precisely. And the workers in that UK study didn't just see a reduction in long-term mortality risk. They reported immediate improvements in daily energy levels, better focus, and a significant drop in musculoskeletal pain.
Well, sure, because they restored cerebral blood flow and took that constant compressive load off their lumbar discs. The whole philosophy here really seems to be all about frequency over intensity.
That is the core takeaway.
The revelation for the listener is that it's the interruption to the sitting that matters most. You have to break the streak. If you sit for 4 hours straight, that metabolic hibernation just deepens. But if you stand up every 40 minutes for just 2 minutes, you are constantly resetting the biological clock.
You are sending a continuous signal to your metabolic engine. You're telling it, hey, we are not in hibernation. Keep the LPL enzymes active. Keep the glucose pathways open. Keep the blood vessels dilated.
It's all about keeping the systems online.
Right. Over the course of a single day, a 2-minute interruption feels totally trivial. But over the course of a 30-year career, those micro bouts of movement compound into a highly significant reduction in systemic disease risk.
So to synthesize this entire deep dive for you, protecting your long-term health is not just about the hour you spend sweating at the gym. It is deeply fundamental dependent on how you manage the hours in between.
It really is.
That Lancet data is a massive wake-up call to a blind spot in our daily routines. So keep doing your morning run, definitely, but recognize that it is not a free pass to sit motionless for the rest of the day. You have to break the streak.
Stand up.
Exactly. Take your next phone call standing up. Walk to a farther bathroom. Just keep the engine running.
Understanding how dramatically our bodies power down when we stop moving forces a much broader philosophical consideration, I think.
Yeah, how so?
Well, if our physiological systems literally shut off their essential maintenance processes when we sit still for too long, we have to ask ourselves, are our hyper-efficient, screen-based work lives fundamentally incompatible with human evolutionary biology?
That's a heavy question.
It is. And if we've accidentally engineered disease into the very way we work, what other normal parts of our daily routine are we going to have to drastically redesign next?
Wow. We built this world of supreme convenience, and now we basically have to figure out how to engineer the friction back into it.
Exactly.
Well, that is definitely something to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Now, seriously, do yourself a favor. Stand up, stretch, go take a quick walk, and keep learning. Catch you next time.